Look at this photograph. Two sisters. Perfectly normal, right? They look innocent, almost sweet. But this single image hides one of the most infamous cases in French history. What these sisters did was so disturbing, so unexpected, that it forced the country to rethink its laws. Their names were Christine and Léa Papin, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why this photo still feels so haunting. But to understand what happened that night, we need to look at the darkness they came from. The childhood that broke them. Christine was born in 1905, Léa in 1911. Their childhood wasn't just hard. It was a chain of pain and neglect that shaped everything they became. Their father, Gustave Papin, was often gone for weeks, and when home, he was harsh. Neighbors recalled constant fights and shouting coming from the house. But their mother, Clémence, may have been even worse. She wasn't simply distant, she was cruel. She would lock her daughters in dark rooms for hours, punish them harshly, and tell them they were worthless, that no one would ever love them. By the time Christine was 8, she was more of a parent than a sister to Léa. She would sneak food for her, hold her close during the long, frightening nights when their parents fought. This is where their intense bond began, not just as sisters, but as protector and protected. Christine became Léa's whole world, and Léa became Christine's only reason to keep going. When Christine was 15 and Léa was 9, their parents abandoned them completely. They were sent to a strict Catholic boarding school where the discipline was relentless. The nuns were determined to break their pride. They made the girls scrub floors until their hands ached, sleep on hard boards, and punished them for the smallest mistakes. But the most painful part was when they tried to separate the sisters. Christine would cry and fight anyone who tried to take Léa away. Eventually, the nuns gave up, calling their attachment unnatural and leaving them together. This was their first lesson. The world was harsh, and they only had each other. The servants who disappeared into the shadows. At 18, Christine left school and became a domestic servant. Her first goal? Get Léa out of that school as soon as possible. For 3 years, Christine worked in wealthy homes, sending nearly every coin she earned for Léa's education. She lived in small servant rooms, ate whatever was left over, and endured the constant orders that came with being the help. Rich families treated their servants as if they were invisible. Christine learned to smile while being scolded, to apologize for things that weren't her fault, to put her dignity aside just to survive. In 1926, when Léa turned 15, Christine finally had enough saved to bring her home. They were reunited after 3 long years, but both of them had changed. Christine was colder now, suspicious of everyone but Léa. And Léa was completely dependent on her older sister, unable to function without her guidance. Soon they found work together in the Lancelin household in Le Mans. For the first time, they thought life might finally be stable. They were wrong. The perfect servants, Le Mans, France. For 6 years, Christine and Léa lived in the Lancelin mansion like shadows. Their room was a tiny attic space, barely big enough for their single bed. They worked every day, from dawn until late at night. Monsieur Lancelin was a retired solicitor who spent most of his time at his club. Madame Lancelin was a woman focused on appearances and reputation. Their daughter Geneviève, 26, was unmarried and deeply unhappy. The family rarely treated the sisters as people. They were never called by name, only girl or you there. Gratitude was never shown, and mistakes were not tolerated. What made it worse was the constant pressure. The family would inspect the house looking for the smallest flaw, ready to scold. Madame Lancelin seemed to enjoy comparing one sister to the other, praising one while criticizing the other, creating tension between them. The sisters retreated into their own world. They spoke to each other in whispers, developed their own signals, and moved through the house in perfect sync. Neighbors later said they seemed too close for sisters. They shared everything, clothes, thoughts, even dreams, and began to show a quiet resentment toward their employers. By 27, Christine had spent nearly a decade in service with no friends or outside life. Léa, 21, had known nothing else. They felt trapped, and like all trapped creatures, their emotions were beginning to boil over. The warning signs everyone ignored. By early 1933, the signs were clear. The sisters had cut themselves off from everyone. They never took days off, never went to church or social events. Shopkeepers noticed how closely they stood together while buying groceries, always whispering, always in their own bubble, Dr. Vergne. who sometimes treated servants, recalled Christine coming to him with headaches, sleeplessness, and thoughts that won't leave her alone. But in 1933, mental health was barely understood. People saw sadness or nervousness as weakness, not as something that needed care. The clearest warning came 2 weeks before the tragedy. Marie, a servant from a neighboring home, said Christine asked her, "What would you do if your employers treated you like you were nothing?" Marie had laughed and said, "That's just life for us." Christine's quiet reply made her uneasy. Not for much longer. The day everything changed, February 2nd, 1933, a Thursday that began like any other in the last 6 years. By nightfall, it would be remembered as one of the most shocking days in French criminal history. The morning routine was familiar. Christine woke first at 5 a.m., gently shaking Leah awake. They dressed in silence, sharing the small mirror in their attic room. Downstairs, they began their daily tasks. Christine handled the laundry and ironing. Leah cleaned and helped prepare meals. The house was unusually quiet. Monsieur Lancelin had gone out early. Madame Lancelin and Geneviève were planning a trip into town that afternoon. Everything appeared normal, but something in Christine's demeanor was different. Leah sensed it immediately. Her sister seemed tense, distant, her mind somewhere else. Around 2 p.m., Christine was in the laundry room, carefully pressing an elaborate dress that belonged to Geneviève. The iron was old and unreliable and had been sparking for weeks, but no replacement was ever provided. Then it happened. A spark, a flash, the smell of burning wire. The iron failed completely, shutting down power to half the house. And across the delicate fabric was now a large, dark scorch mark. To most, this would have been just an unfortunate accident. The dress could be replaced, the power restored, but Christine knew what would come next. 6 years of experience told her exactly how this mistake would be treated. She stood in the dim room, clutching the burned dress, feeling an overwhelming pressure building inside. The breaking point, when Madame Lancelin and Geneviève saw the damage around 4 p.m. Their reaction was exactly as Christine had feared. They scolded her harshly in front of Leah, called her careless, threatened to deduct the cost from their small wages. Then Geneviève made the comment that lit the fuse. "Look at them. 2 grown women who can't even manage a simple iron. Perhaps we should find servants who actually know how to do their jobs." The thought of losing their positions, of being separated, thrown back into the world with nothing, hit both sisters like a shockwave. Christine felt years of frustration rising like a storm. 6 years of "Yes, madame. Sorry, madame. It won't happen again, madame." 6 years of feeling less than human. Leah saw the change in her sister's expression and, with their near telepathic bond, understood that something irreversible was about to happen. What followed was sudden, intense, and to this day, experts still struggle to fully explain how quickly everything spiraled out of control. The explosion, the outburst came without warning. One moment, Christine stood silently, head bowed under the scolding. The next, she snapped, lunging at Geneviève with a sudden fury that no one saw coming. This wasn't a simple moment of anger. It was 6 years of frustration, humiliation, and pain finally breaking through. Christine's first strike sent Geneviève stumbling back into the hallway. Madame Lancelin screamed and rushed to her daughter, but Leah was already moving to block her. The sisters acted as if perfectly in sync, moving with a strange, practiced precision. Christine went for Geneviève while Leah struggled with Madame Lancelin. What made the attack so shocking wasn't just its force, it was its intimacy. This wasn't about theft or a quick escape. It was the release of years of bottled-up rage. They grabbed whatever was near, a heavy household object, tools from the kitchen, even their own hands. What followed was so intense that investigators later said it looked less like a crime and more like a storm had swept through the house. Experts would later suggest that the attack was a symbolic act, a way for the sisters to take back power from those who had made them feel powerless for so long. The struggle lasted less than half an hour. By the end, the house was silent. The hallway showed signs of a fierce confrontation, a scene that shocked even experienced police. The calm after the storm. Perhaps most disturbing of all was what the sisters did next. They cleaned themselves up, changed into fresh clothes, and tidied their small attic room. Then they lay down together in their bed, side by side, as though the day had been no different from any other. There was no attempt to run, no panic, only an eerie calm. When later asked why they hadn't fled, Christine's answer was chillingly simple. Where would we go? We had nowhere else. They had been told for years that they were nothing, had nowhere to belong, and even in that moment, they still believed it. The discovery. Around 6 p.m., Monsieur Lancelin returned home to find the house dark and unusually quiet. He called out for his wife and daughter. No reply. He tried the door, but it was locked from the inside, something they never did when at home. Worried, he fetched his neighbor, Monsieur Rousseau. Together, they climbed a ladder to a second-floor window. What they saw inside horrified them. Police were called immediately, but even experienced officers were shaken by what they found. Detective Henri Bousquet would later write that the scene was unlike anything he had ever witnessed. At first, the sisters were found lying peacefully in their bed, and many assumed they were victims who had somehow survived. Only, when small traces of blood were noticed on Christine's hands, did the awful truth come into focus. The confession. Did you kill Madame Lancelin and her daughter? Detective Bousquet asked. Yes, Christine replied without hesitation. They were cruel to us, and that was it. No long explanation, no dramatic plea, no visible remorse. When pressed for details, Christine simply repeated, "They treated us badly." So we fought back. Leah spoke even less. When asked if she regretted what had happened, she seemed puzzled by the question. Regret? She asked softly. Why would we regret it? The police psychiatrist who examined them noted that both sisters seemed strangely detached from the reality of what had taken place. They spoke of the events calmly, almost as if describing household chores. They showed no clear sense that they had done something wrong, Dr. Rouget wrote. It was as though they couldn't understand why everyone was so shocked. The trial that shocked France. 6 months later, the trial began. And it immediately became a national obsession. Newspapers called it the crime of the century. Reporters filled the courtroom, eager to see the women who had committed such an incomprehensible act. What shocked many was how ordinary the sisters appeared. Dressed in simple black dresses, hair neatly combed, sitting side by side, and they could have been anyone's daughters. The prosecutor, Maître Chenetier, struggled to convince the jury of the gravity of the crime, facing two women who appeared almost meek. These women, he declared, did something that forces us to question what human beings are capable of. But the defense told another story. Maître Riom spoke of two young women shaped by a lifetime of mistreatment, abandonment, and humiliation. They are not evil, he argued. They are deeply damaged. Psychiatrists studied the sisters for weeks. Dr. Léon Perrin, a leading expert, concluded that Christine and Leah had built a private world of their own. In their minds, he said, this was not murder. It was an act of survival, a way of striking back at those they believed had hurt them. Christine herself gave the most chilling testimony. Asked to describe what happened, she spoke in a calm, emotionless voice. They told us we were worthless. We showed them we weren't. When the prosecutor asked if she felt sorry for taking 2 lives, Christine frowned. Innocent? She asked. They were not innocent. They made us feel like nothing. The sentences. After 3 days, the jury returned with their verdict. Christine, seen as the leader, was sentenced to death. Leah, considered under her sister's influence, was given 10 years of hard labor. The courtroom erupted. Some cheered. Others cried. But the most dramatic moment came from the sisters themselves. When they understood they would be separated, Christine began shouting her sister's name again and again. Leah collapsed, sobbing, and had to be carried from the room. For the first time since their arrest, the two showed deep emotion, reaching for one another as guards pulled them apart. The final breakdown. In prison, separated from Leah for the first time in her life, Christine's mental state collapsed. She refused to eat, believing the guards wanted to harm her. She became frail, restless, and withdrawn. Most unsettling were her conversations with Leah, conversations that guards soon realized were entirely one-sided. Christine spent hours speaking softly to the empty cell, as though her sister were still there. Don't worry, Leah. They heard her whisper, "I'll protect you. I'll always protect you." Prison psychiatrist Dr. Rouget recorded Christine's rapid decline. She has built a private world where her sister is with her. She leaves half her food untouched for Leah, makes space on her bed, and speaks with her for hours. It became painfully clear that Christine could not exist without her sister. Their bond, so intense and consuming, was tearing her apart. Her death sentence was later commuted to life in prison, but it came too late. Christine died in her cell on May 18, 1937, just 4 years later. The official cause was exhaustion, but those who knew her believed she simply couldn't bear the separation. Her last words, according to the prison chaplain, were, "Tell Leah I'm waiting for her," Leah's lonely life. Leah served her full sentence and was released in 1943. She was 32 years old and completely alone for the first time in her life. She changed her name to Marie and took a job as a chambermaid in a small hotel in Nantes. For nearly 6 decades, she lived quietly, never marrying or having children. Hotel guests described her as polite and diligent, but distant, always keeping to herself. Neighbors noticed odd habits. She would set the table for 2, speak softly as if someone else were there, and always kept 2 of everything in her home: 2 pillows, 2 nightgowns, 2 toothbrushes. It was as if she was still living with her sister, even decades after Christine's death. Leah passed away in 2001 at the age of 90. She was found lying peacefully in bed, with 2 pillows by her side. After almost 70 years, she had never truly left that attic room in her mind. Some bonds, it seems, are stronger than time and impossible to break. The legacy of violence. The Papin sisters' case changed France forever. It forced society to face difficult questions about class, power, and the treatment of domestic workers. Labor laws were eventually reformed and working conditions improved. The idea that employers could treat their staff as less than human was finally challenged. But perhaps the most unsettling part of this case is what it revealed about human nature. It showed that under enough pressure, anyone can reach a breaking point. Christine and Leah were not born as killers. They were shaped by years of neglect, abuse, and a system that made them feel invisible. Their story inspired books, plays, and films. Jean-Paul Sartre saw them as symbols of the oppressed fighting back. Jean Genet based his play, The Maids, on their story. But beyond the art and philosophy, this remains a tragedy. 2 young women so damaged by life that they lost their way entirely. The photo that started it all. So let's go back to that photograph. 2 sisters side by side, looking calm and ordinary. It was taken in 1932, just months before everything changed. Look closer. Christine's hand rests protectively on Leah's shoulder. They stand a little too close, their expressions distant, as if looking at something no one else could see. The signs were there: the isolation, the dependence, the quiet resentment. But no one noticed. Everyone who knew them said the same thing afterward. They seemed so quiet, so normal. And that's what makes this story so haunting. Sometimes danger doesn't look dangerous. Sometimes it hides behind the most ordinary faces, the questions that remain. Even today, nearly a century later, the case still leaves us with questions we can't easily answer. What turns someone into a killer? Is it something they're born with, or something that life creates? Could this tragedy have been prevented if someone had helped the sisters, or treated them with kindness? And perhaps the most chilling thought: how many other people right now are living on the edge, one small step away from their own breaking point? The next time you look at an old photograph, ask yourself, what stories might be hidden behind those calm faces? What pain might they be carrying? Because the case of Christine and Leah Papin reminds us that we never truly know what someone else has endured, or what they might be capable of. The photograph that began this story is more than just an image. It is a warning. Normalcy can be a mask, hiding a storm beneath the surface. Look at Christine and Leah one last time. 2 sisters who looked so normal.